What is going on today, everybody? It's Buddy, and in this video I'm going to show you guys how I took this neglected, beat up Lexus with a whole lot of engine problems and turned it into thousands of dollars of profit. And if you're new to the channel, my name is Buddy and I buy and sell cars full time, and I'm about to show you guys my whole process and how I make money flipping cars, from how much money I knew I should buy this Lexus for, how much I knew I could sell it for, how much money I had to put into it, and ultimately how much money I made. So without further ado, let's jump right into the video. So I was relaxing on my Monday night when my phone dinged with a notification from the SWOOPA app alerting me of a new potential deal on Marketplace. It was a 2008 Lexus ES350 with only 116,000 miles for only $3,000. Now, I know these Lexuses sell pretty fast since they're pretty much just a luxury Toyota. Now, from experience, this car should be priced probably around the $6,000 mark, so I knew there was something up with it since it was only priced at $3,000. So let's check it out. I clicked on the ad to go through the pictures and see what was up with this thing. The exterior pictures looked good. It didn't look like it had any noticeable damage on it, so the low price wasn't due to this thing being in like a fresh accident or anything, so that's good news. So there was only really two poorly taken pictures of the exterior. There wasn't a lot to go off of. Now, the same with the interior. Everything looked to be in decent shape, no noticeable rips or tears in the seats, but again, these pictures were really poorly taken on a cheap phone. The angles didn't really show anything. You can't really tell exactly the condition of the interior or exterior from these pictures, but it didn't look like it was noticeably messed up. So let's check out the description and see what the story with this car was and see why it was so cheap. Now, a description stated, drives great, but has a small coolant leak. Don't drive it anymore. So let's break down that description a little bit. The first thing is it drives great, but has a small coolant leak. Now, a coolant leak can be something super easy to fix, like a bad radiator hose clamp or something, or as bad as a whole blown head gasket. But apparently it drives great, so besides the coolant leak, I guess this thing still runs and drives all right. Now, the other part of the descriptions is don't drive it anymore. Now, this is actually a really good thing you want to see on the description. Anything like this sort tells me that the seller has a new car and this thing is just taking up space in his driveway. So that means he's definitely negotiable and he's definitely willing to get rid of this thing because it's not even his daily driver anymore. So I'm definitely interested in seeing this car in person. So I sent the seller a message. I didn't want to waste a bunch of time asking a bunch of questions on this particular car since it was only a few miles away. Now, the further a car is away, I usually do hammer them with a little more questions just so I don't completely waste my time. But since it was so close, it's not going to be a waste of time just driving up the road anyways. So we figured out a time that would work for the both of us, and later that evening I set out to see the car in person. Now, while we're on the way to see the car in person, I want to talk about two things in particular. One is a very important one, and that's how to inspect a used car before you buy it. Now, I have a 3-part series on how to inspect a used car, and there's about an hour of content between those videos. This is me going over everything you need to know from the interior to the exterior to check the engine bay, all that good stuff. And the second thing, there's always something that you need to bring with you before you go look at a used car, and that is an OBD reader. I have an Amazon link to 3 different OBD readers at different price points in the description that I personally use and recommend. Now, I've been buying and selling cars for years, and I think probably the most important thing for getting profitable flips is to get to the ads first. It's guaranteed that any car on Marketplace underpriced by a few $1,000s will be pending in literally minutes. So a tool I personally use for car dealers and pro flippers is an app called SWOOPA. It also shows you the estimated value of the car in the feed, so you can see at a glance if the price is a good deal, a bad deal, or even a steal. So they now have new AI filters that let you set your bot to only show underpriced cars and block obvious bad deals to save you a ton of time. You can use their AI evaluation tool to quickly check if a deal is worth it. It breaks down any issues and shows a potential profit margin. It even gives you strategy tips too. Now, once you've set up your bot, SWOOPA does the rest for you, searching Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, Craigslist, and you can filter results by mileage, year, make, model, or just use the AI price filter and only see underpriced cars with a healthy profit margin. SWOOPA will continuously search Marketplace every minute and ping you with an alert when a deal is underpriced, and then you can message the seller first before the other 50 flippers in your areas hit them up. So you can either scroll on Marketplace all day or get notified instantly with the SWOOPA app. It costs money to use, but it's easily worth it, and you'll make that investment back tenfold. This app's not just for cars, it works for iPhones, couches, camera gear, pretty much anything you can flip and make a side hustle or a business out of. This is hands down the best company I've ever promoted. It's built by flippers for flippers. There's a link in the description, so go get the free trial and check it out. So after only a few minutes of driving, we finally arrived here at the seller's house. Now, finally seeing the car in person, I was actually really happy with the condition of the paint. There was no bad fading on the paint. There was no dents or noticeable deep scratches. There was really nothing on the exterior of this car that stuck out like a sore thumb. The only thing thing that needed to be addressed was these super yellowed headlights. That was definitely making this car look older than it was. Now, taking a look at the interior, it was a completely different story. As soon as I opened the door, I noticed all the flaws everywhere. And the first thing that stuck out is this center console lid was super worn down, the leather was all ripped up, and if we pan here to the left, you can see that this AC vent here in the center was all cracked up and missing pieces were everywhere. So that was definitely a couple things that needed to be fixed. Now, also here on the steering wheel, the buttons were all faded and peeling. Now, I'm starting to think that the person who owned this car, or maybe the previous owner, was someone who picked at things. You can see this center console lid, it looked like they was just like picked over and over with their thumbnail, and there was a small crater here right in the button, and I think they did the same here with their steering wheel buttons, so that's probably why they look like this. Now, another thing I found here in the interior was that this seat here in the back had a really nice rip in it. If you watched the last car flipping episode, you'd see that the other Lexus that I just flipped had the same issue with all these perforated leather panels ripping super easily. It is a super common issue in these older Lexuses. Now, also, it was pretty dirty. There was some staining on the floorboards as well as some floor mat staining. The steering wheel had some like white paint caked in on it. It was pretty dirty all around, but not as bad as some of the cars I've done here on this series before, and I'm pretty sure I can get this interior looking perfect by the time I'm done with it. So now that we're done inspecting the interior and exterior, it's time to check up on the mechanical issues and see what's really going on with this thing. So the very first thing that I noticed when I opened the hood is that the hood just falls right down right away. Now, with these shocks on both sides, it's supposed to stay up. There's no hood latch on this thing. It's just supposed to stay up, but these shocks are completely shot out. Now, another thing I noticed here when starting the car is this terrible squealing noise. I knew right away this noise was definitely a belt issue. When I turned the car off to check the condition of the belt, I could see how worn down this belt was. You can see it's almost like a whitish color. If I zoom in here, a belt should be like a pitch black rubber color, almost like a tire. It didn't look like that at all. You can see it was super old and raggedy, and that's why it was squeaking like this every time I turned the car on. Now, I definitely noticed there was a small coolant leak when it was running. It was not too bad. I wasn't too concerned about getting this thing home with this small leak. It was only a few minutes away from my house. Now, I couldn't really tell what the leak was. I don't think it's coming from any of the radiator hoses, but maybe the bottom of the radiator. But I don't think it would be too big of a deal if I get this car for the right price. So obviously at this point, the right price is what I needed to make the deal on this Lexus. Now, obviously, after all these things we've seen on the car, it's going to take a good bit of effort to make this thing worthy of the $6,000 book value. And at $3,000, it honestly seemed like a fair price, but of course, I'm not going to pay asking price. I told the seller I got $1,800 cash in my pocket. I'm ready to take your problem and make it mine. He countered at $2,800, and he said it was a great deal for me. So I explained that the coolant leak could be a pain to find. It might not even make it home with the belt squeaking. I might have to pay a couple $100s on a tow truck, and I'm not really lying at this point. I'm hoping that it makes it home, but we'll see. And this belt could snap at any minute. So it was really a gamble for me to even try and drive this thing home. I told him to meet in the middle at $2,400. I pulled the cash out of my pocket and I started counting. Now, he did hesitate for a second, but then he ended up shaking my hand and the car was officially mine. We made the deal happen at $2,400. I think it was a pretty fair deal for both of us. So now it's time to get this Lexus back to my house and we're gonna get it ready to fixed up and ready for its new owner. Now, while we're on the way back to the house, I wanted to mention the topic of negotiation. Now, I have 17 other car flipping videos in this series of car flipping, and each of them touch a little bit on negotiation. If you watch them all, you should really know exactly what to say, what not to say, all the tactics I use, and how to buy a used car when it comes to negotiation. Also, be sure to subscribe so you can see more of my car flipping videos on your homepage. Now, we both don't want this to be the last time you watch one of my videos, so be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Now, after the drive back to the house, which was not more than 10 minutes at all, the coolant leaked all out of the car. It was literally overheating like almost right when I pulled into my driveway. You can see here I did record it. It was right at the point where it's just starting to overheat. I got so lucky just barely making this thing in my driveway. Now I turned off the car right away to avoid damaging the engine, because if a car overheats too much, you can completely destroy the engine, and that was definitely a close one. So now with the car safely home, it's time to start fixing it up and getting it ready for its new home. Now you guys know how I like to do it. I made a complete checklist for everything this car needs. So let's start here with the first thing, and let's fix up those old hood shocks so we can actually get this hood propped up, because we're going to be doing a little bit of engine work on this car. So replacing the hood shocks on a car or truck is actually pretty easy. So the first thing that I have to do is find something to hold the hood open while I do this. Now I found an old broomstick that I had laying around in my garage, and this actually worked out great. It was the perfect size. Now to remove the old shocks, you need to pull out this little metal retaining clip. Now I usually use a pick to get behind this little metal piece, and you just yank it back, and once that clip is pulled back, you simply just remove it. Now with the old ones removed, all you need to do is snap the new ones in place, and the new ones snap in. You don't have to pull anything, they just push on in, and you can see the hood stays completely open by itself without the broomstick. Now we can go ahead and we can cross off replacing the hood shocks off the list and move on. But before we move on, I want to start a money invested chart so we can keep track of how much money we have invested in this project. Now we have $2,400 for the price of the car and $25 for the hood shocks, so let's move on to getting that belt changed. Now I can always add more coolant and drive it for about 10 minutes or so, but if I even want to move this thing from one part of my driveway to the other, it's going to be pushing it with this belt because this thing seems like it's ready to snap off. So we're going to dress the belt first. First thing to do was pop the old belt off. Now how you do that is you loosen up the tensioner on this belt with the belt tensioner wrench. Now since the belt was on the side of the engine instead of the front of the engine, it's such a tight squeeze. So what we had to do in order to get room to work on it is we had to remove the front passenger side wheel, and we had to get to the engine from that side. Now once it's all loosened up, you can pull the old belt off. I had my friend help me out since this was such a pain to do by myself. Now once I got the old belt off, I noticed something that explained a whole lot here about this car. Now if you look here, these are all pulleys, and this pulley here was super loose and had a lot of play in it. And it just so happens this pulley is the water pump, and the water pump obviously holds the coolant, and the bearings are really shot out in this pulley, so that definitely explains here the coolant leak. So a simple dry belt job is now going to turn into a complete water pump replacement. And as you can see, the engineers at Lexus did not give us a lot of space to work here on this side of the engine. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to make some room so I can work on these engines. So the first thing I got to do here is remove the top motor mount here, and that was just a few bolts that held it in place. And once those bolts were gone, this thing just lifted right off. So now it was time to slide the jack under the engine to brace it, because now we got to remove the lower motor mount as well. And once I removed it, you can see here that I can move the engine around by jacking it up and down to create enough space to work on what I need to get to. So I jacked it up to the point that I had enough room to get to the water pump. Now with the engine jacked up and I have a lot more room to see, you can really now see how bad this pulley was. It was super loose. This thing was to have absolutely no play to it, and this was 100% the reason for the coolant leak. So we're going to start here by removing all the hose clamps and radiator hoses, and these hose clamps can be a pain, and this is actually probably one of the most frustrating parts of this entire job. Now with all the room we have to work here, we can start by removing this bracket that attaches to the motor mount. Now after I took the bolts off that held that in place, we started to work here on the thermostat housing that was right under there. Now with that out of the way, I finally got enough room to unbolt all the bolts that held the water pump in place, and after a lot of wrenching, I was finally able to pull the water pump out completely. Now you can see here we got a new one ready to rock and install, and this is what it looks like on the inside of a water pump. You can see when the pulley is turned by the dry belt, it spins this impeller that circulates all the coolant through the engine to keep the engine at operating temperature. So that's just a quick background how a water pump works. So now it's time to slide the new water pump in place and install all the bolts that hold it together, and then reassemble everything all back together. So now it's time to finally put that new belt in place, and you can really see here what I was talking about earlier, how the new belt is compared to this old worn down belt. This thing is dried out, ready to snap any second. So me and my friend were able to put the new belt back in place, and all that's left is to fill it up with coolant. And what I'm using here is distilled water, since antifreeze is not really needed in Florida since it never really gets under 40 degrees here at all. So now what I'm using to refill this coolant system is a radiator fill funnel. What this does is make sure it gets all the fluid throughout the entirety of the engine and make sure there's no air left in the engine, because that can create hot spots and damage your engine. So now that we have absolutely no leaks, we have no squeaky belt, this thing is in perfect mechanical shape, we can go ahead and we cross off fixing the squeaking belt off the list, as well as fixing the coolant leak, since we just did them both at the same time. And now all the mechanical issues are fixed up in this car, and now we can start addressing the cosmetic issues. But first, let's jump back to the money invested chart. Now we have $20 for the price of the new belt, since it was pretty inexpensive, and we have $85 for the price of the water pump. Now I also gave my friend $100 because we spent the afternoon together and he helped me out putting this new belt and water pump on, so we're going to add that $100 on as well. So now we're going to start here with the only flaw on the exterior, and that was to get those headlights restored. Now lucky for you guys, I have this entire long form video on how to professionally restore your headlights with the exact method that I use for every single car I flip. So what you see me doing here is the last step, and that is the final polish. I'm also using a buffing wheel drill attachment that'll explain it all how this stuff works in the long form video I have on my channel. And after I did that, you can see the before and after between these two headlights. It is a night and day difference, and once I did both headlights, you can really see how much of a difference it's made. It helps with visibility at night, and it also makes the car just look so much nicer. So let's go ahead and cross off restoring the headlights off the list and move move on to the interior, and that needed a whole lot of love. So let's start with this busted AC vent. So I tried to pull it out in one piece, but it just kind of kept crumbling apart. So eventually I got a nice enough grip to just snap it out of place. Now there was just one little electrical connector that controlled the security light, and from there I ordered a new one on Amazon. It only cost $19. Now it was super easy to reinstall it. All I had to do was plug in the one little wiring harness, and it fit perfectly and it color matched great. So let's go ahead and cross off replacing the AC vent off the list and move on to those busted steering wheel buttons. So the first thing I had to do was remove the airbag. So on one side of the steering wheel there was a small plastic cover that needed to be removed. Now once it was removed, there was a small bolt that needed to be loosened as well. I repeated the process on both sides by removing the cover and unbolting the screws. Now with both sides loosened, I was able to just remove this airbag and push it out of the way. I didn't need to unplug anything. All I did was just prop it up on the steering wheel. Now with the airbag out of the way, I took my screwdriver, and there was just one screw holding the button module in place. Now after the screw was off, there was just a small clip I was able to push with the side of my finger and fully remove the module. Now that the module was removed, there was 3 screws here on the back of that module that had to loosen up, and once those 3 screws were all released, I was able to pull out the faded button cover off, and I was able to put the new one in place. All I had to do was screw back down those 3 screws and then snap it back in place. Now obviously I repeated the process here on the other side, and then I put the airbag back in place. I secured it back down with those 2 screws on both sides, and now you guys can see how much better this steering wheel looks. It only took me about 30 minutes, and it was a really easy job, and it looks so much better now. So we can go ahead and we can cross off fixing the steering wheel buttons off the list and move on to the next thing, and that was to get all these ripped up seats reupholstered. But real quick, let's jump back to our money invested chart because we got to add a few things. Now it cost $19 for the price of that new AC vent, and it was $15 for the price of these new button covers, so really not bad at all, and a huge difference in the interior. So now getting back to getting this car reupholstered. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the rear seats. Now rear seats on almost every single car are really easy to remove. There's just tension clips that hold them in place. So I just had to get a nice grip here on the bottom and just pull them on up. Now the next thing I needed to remove was that center console lid. It was fairly easy. All I had to do was prop it open, and from there I was able to compress these 2 slides off the track, and as you can see now, it let it fully open from there. Now once it was fully open, there was 4 screws holding it in place, and once those screws were removed, you can really see that this thing just comes right off now. Now when I was removing these 4 screws, I had my knee on the driver's seat, and it was just my luck that my knee caught the driver's seat to get a nice big tear in it. Now like I said earlier, the leather on these perforated Lexus cars are just terrible. You can just see how easily this stuff tears from just my knee resting on it. So it was time to remove the driver's seat as well, since we got to get this thing fixed up anyways because we're already going to the upholstery shop. So there's 4 bolts that held down this seat in place, 2 in the front and 2 in the back, and after they were removed, I unplugged the electrical connectors from under the seat, and I was able to remove the seat entirely from there. Now with everything removed, I loaded it all in the back of the SUV. I took it up to the upholstery shop, and after a few days I picked it up, and $275 later, all 3 pieces were fixed up, color matched perfectly. I'm kind of glad the driver's seat ripped up when it did, because if it ripped up a couple days later, I would have sucked because I would have to go all the way back to the upholstery shop, but it happened to do it on the day I was going to the upholstery shop, so no big deal. We can go ahead and we can cross off getting the interior reupholstered. We can move on to the next step, and that was to get the leather dye out and get this leather looking beautiful again. So you can see here these seats were pretty beat up and had some good wear in them. So one thing I use to restore leather seats is leather dye. Now I get my leather dye by a company called SeatDoctors.com. They use your VIN number and they get the exact color match of your factory interior. That way you can make sure that you're not dyeing with a completely different color and everything looks nice and seamless. So the first thing that we're going to do is make sure the surface is clean. So let's start here by soaking this leather in a cleaning solution, and next what we're going to do is scrub the cleaning solution into leather with a soft bristle scrub brush to really work out all that dirt. And after we scrubbed, we're going to wipe away all the dirt that we worked out with a clean microfiber cloth. Now once the seat is clean, it's time to let it dry. Now I'm going to speed up the process with a hair dryer to really make sure this leather is dry. Now we got our leather dye all shaken up and ready to use. We're going to dump a generous amount on a fresh microfiber cloth and start working the stuff into the leather. And after the seat is completely covered with the leather dye, I'm going to take the hair dryer again and dry the leather dye completely, and then go ahead and hit it with a second coat. And once the second coat is dry, I'm going to do the same thing here with a third coat, hitting it with the hair dryer in between coats. And once everything is nice and dry, you can really see how awesome this leather is looking. It went from worn down and raggedy looking looking to pretty much looking like a brand new seat. Now I repeated the process on all the seats and I got this leather in this car looking absolutely awesome again. So we can go ahead and we can cross off restoring the leather and move on to the next step on the list. And that was to give this thing an entire detail before we put these freshly restored leather seats in the car. But first, let's jump back to the money invested chart and add a few things. We have $275 for the upholstery job and we have $50 for the price of the leather dye. So now back to this detail. So anytime I detail a car, I like to remove all the seats. And since the front driver's seat was already removed from being at the upholstery shop, all I had to do was remove the passenger seat. Now with all the seats removed, you can see how much easier it is to get in there and deep clean all these carpets. But first off, we gotta vacuum all these carpets up. So we're going to start here with a vacuum and we're gonna thoroughly get all this dirt and random stuff that's deeply embedded in this carpet up. Now I take about 15 minutes alone just to vacuum. I wanna make sure I don't get my carpet cleaner all clogged up with this stuff. And after we're all vacuumed up, I take some cleaner and my little handheld pump sprayer and I soak the entire carpet with a generous amount of cleaner while really focusing on those stain portions. I let it soak for about 5 minutes and after the 5 minutes is up, I use a drill brush attachment to really work in the cleaner all deep into the fabric of this carpet. You can do this by hand with a regular brush, but the drill attachment really speeds up the process and it works out those stains really well. And once it's all worked in, I finish the job here with my carpet cleaner. This thing sprays clean water in and it sucks all the dirt and yucky stuff out. It leaves the car smelling brand new, it leaves it with a fresh car smell, and it takes out all those real stubborn stains. Now, I also repeated the exact process here on the floor mats to make sure they look as beautiful as possible before they go back in. Now, once everything was all clean, it was time to reinstall the seats and get the center console lid reinstalled. And once I was finished, all I had to do was give this thing a thorough wipe down because the dash and the cup holder were still super dirty. So I took my time, I scrubbed out all the dust and dried up gunk, and also scrubbed the white stuff that was caked in here on the steering wheel. Now, I also touched up the inside door handle with some leather dye and I got it cleaned up. You can see it was really worn down. It was almost kind of like a brown blackish color from being so worn in, and this leather dye made it look beautiful again. So once everything was said and done, the seats were back inside. The interior of this car was looking absolutely amazing, all cleaned up, super nice, smells like a brand new car. The interior is looking as beautiful as the exterior. You can really see how far this thing has came compared to when we first got it. It looks absolutely awesome. So now that we got this thing looking great both inside and out and free of all mechanical issues, we are finally officially ready to post this thing and make some money. So at this point, I snapped some really nice pictures of this car, and after I was done, you can really see how clean this thing looks on the inside and out. So the Blue Book value started anywhere between $5,800 and $7,300. So I wanted to start out at the higher end at $7,250, and I posted it at that price and waited to see what happened. So I had a few people interested, a bunch of tire kickers, but I had this one guy who lowballed me hard at only $5,000. Now what I did is I didn't say yes or no. I just said we're close. Even though he was pretty far away from what I wanted to get out of this car, I told him to come check it out anyways. He ended up really liking the car and he offered me $5,000 after the test drive. Now I knew he was going to do that, so what I did is I showed him the book value. I said, yo, if there's nothing wrong with the car, honestly, I don't see why you wouldn't pay at least what the car is worth. He said he was looking for a deal, and I agreed. Obviously a deal is what everybody wants, but this car is worth at least $6,600, bro, at the absolute minimum. I said, I'll take $300 off that price, even though I know it's worth every penny of $6,600. I'll let you win and you can get it for $6,300. He agreed. It was a super fair deal. He really wanted the $5,000 mark, but he did agree that the car was all there. It was super clean. He shook my hand at $6,300 and we finally made the deal. Now the moral of the story is lowballers can still be buyers, so don't try and talk too much about numbers over Messenger. Just try to get them on the test drive and negotiate from there after they already started falling in love with the car. So now that we got the car sold, it's time to go back to the money invested chart and we're going to add everything up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the last few things up, and we're going to add $80 here for my friend helping me out in the detail, as well as another $100 for miscellaneous things I may be forgetting, like gas, detailing products, and random things that I may not remember. So let's add all this up together, and that brings us to a grand total of $3,169 in this project. We're just going to call it $3,170, and with a sale price of $6,300, that leaves us with a total profit margin of $3,130 in straight profit. That is not bad at all. So let's do a little more math to find out the hourly rate. So it took about 15 minutes to replace the hood shocks. Between fixing the squeaky belt and diagnosing the water pump and replacing it, it took about 4 hours, let's say. Restoring the headlights only took about an hour. Replacing the broken AC vent was about another 15 minutes. Replacing the steering wheel buttons took about an hour. Another hour to remove the upholstery and take it to the shop. Another 2 hours to clean and leather dye all the interior upholstery. And about 4 hours between me and my friend to strip and detail the interior. And we'll add another 5 hours of miscellaneous things like drive time, part shopping, inspecting the car, and miscellaneous things like that. So if we add all these things up, it comes out to a grand total amount of labor invested of 18.5 hours. So we're going to take the $3,130 of profit, we're going to divide that by 18.5 hours of labor, and that comes out to a grand total of $169 an hour. That is a huge win in my book and another successful flip here on the channel. Now, if you guys know, I do all my own repairs, filming, editing, and everything in between all myself, and I would greatly appreciate if you guys support the channel by hitting the like button, subscribing if you haven't already, and consider supporting me on Patreon. Leaving a comment on the video also helps out with the algorithm. Now, with YouTube pushing YouTube Shorts so hard, my videos do not get the same love and views they used to, so I'm going to need all the help I can get in order to continue making these car flip videos for you guys. And also, a huge shout out to the SWOOPA app for being the official sponsor in this video. This app is a huge game changer. I definitely recommend anybody looking to get into car flipping of any kind to get this app. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys on the next car flipping video.